So tell me. I'm sorry, I missed your open house at the Y maybe it was a week or two ago. How did it go? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've been super blessed to have a lot of great community partners. The Harrison Family YMCA is definitely one of those throughout the last several years, and we had a great event, our second event with the mobile market through our nonprofit Right for Revival, where we have a pay what you can grocery store on wheels on this bus that we've retrofitted into a grocery store with fresh produce and shelf stable and frozen goods. And the YMCA has been a great place for those events.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Well, look, let's start over. Just tell us a little bit about the mission, how you got into it, and really how it's kind of evolved. Because I went out and visited you when you just had gotten going. A pretty impressive thing that you've got going on. Some of the foods that you're making, some of the food that you're distributing, how you're sorting it. And there have been a lot of challenges. You had some sewer issues. It's a lot of hurdles, but you've made it through. So just start at the beginning. How did you end up with this notion? First of all, what is it? Share it with everybody.
How much time do you have?
We got at least an hour.
Okay. Well, it's a lot to pack into a story, but I would say that we started Ripe Revival originally with the mission to revive produce and people for purpose, and we started the business in late 2019 with the intent to take farmers' excess crops and turn them into protein gummies.
Okay, right.
And so wanted to move back to Rocky Mounts where I was born and raised, and so I wanted to plant the business here. I bought a building in December of 2019, spent 6 months upfitting the building, putting in a bunch of equipment that was funded through a grant from the Kroger Foundation. Mm-hmm. Basically tied my life savings up in this business, and the week we were supposed to start production, COVID-19 shut down the state.
Right.
And all of our customers said, we're not taking on any products right now. So basically we were just kind of had the carpet pulled out from under us. And that was, I think, right after you had come to visit and see the trial runs. And we were super excited about that business at the time, but it really forced us into survival mode to figure out what we were going to do to survive. And since then, it's just been a wild ride. There's a lot that's gone on, and really just jumped to action. We saw so much need. Not only were we crippled as a business, but there were so many businesses around us crippled. Farmers and food producers who had lost all of their restaurant business and had no outlets for their products. So I took my experience in fresh produce, and I had founded a subscription box before and built a website. And within 3 days, we had hundreds of members across the state that we were delivering local produce and food products to through Ripe Revival Market. And so that was kind of our first step of survival during the pandemic.
So that was your small pivot. You'd gone from trying to develop this product, try to get it on shelves, and I want to talk about that a little bit too, because
Absolutely.
you don't want to just dance over it. But the first pivot was come up with subscription boxes, which I've subscribed to, and it was an awesome product. Enjoyed it. What's funny about that is I subscribed and actually got delivered to my neighbor and dear friend of our families, and he thought it was for him, so I didn't have the heart to tell him that it wasn't. So I ended up with 2 subscriptions.
Well, thank you.
For at least a period in time. I don't think I renewed. I don't know how that happened, but we'll come back to that. So tell us about the product, right? So that was the initial plan. That was the initial business plan. And that's something you probably could have done anywhere that there is surplus crops, and that would be pretty much most of North Carolina.
Yeah, we were actually incorporating a patented technology to extract and condense polyphenols out of excess blueberry skins, grape skins, sweet potatoes. So we actually created the first ever upcycled gummy with a complete protein in it,
right? Made
from excess produce. And that produce was coming from mostly North Carolina, and the process was proprietary to some NC State technology. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, since then, some of the supply chain issues have caused us to kind of put that business on hold.
Okay.
We are still making gummies to a certain extent. We're making gummies for other healthcare companies.
Right.
That's another pivot that we've made, is that we're helping companies all over the country make carriers for certain things like dialysis clinics and really nutraceutical gummies, which is really fun.
Well, sure. I hadn't even thought about that, but dialysis patients in particular have these just each individual unique plans in terms of what they can eat and not eat, and to be able to put that into a gummy is tremendous. I have had not even considered that. That's so
gummies are one
fascinating.
of the most popular carriers for different ingredients at this point. And so nutrition, protein was what our original goal was. But just because we didn't have the ingredient supply chain, we didn't want to let the infrastructure just sit idle. So we pivoted and just started creating new distribution channels through that.
Sure, well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've done the boxes, and now you've got basically a rolling grocery store. So what does the evolution of the business look like 2 years later?
Yeah,
and at least 2 pivots.
Well, there's a couple more pivots. I think I can
let's
breeze
go
through
all
those
of them.
pivots.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
take your time.
Ripe Revival Market is still a big part of our business. We still deliver boxes from Chapel Hill all the way to Wilmington every week, and we're working to make a more customizable platform where our members can choose what they get in their box. We're hoping to launch that in the next month or so. But one of our bigger businesses is actually our commercial produce business, and it's always been a part of what we've done. That's where my background is. But we farm, we work with farmers, and we market over 1,000 acres of produce a year through Ripe Revival Produce, which is a big part of our company. It's really we say everything starts on the farm. That's how we develop all of our relationships with our supply chain and how it flows through our business ecosystem. And so it's unique that not only were we solving the need of consumers during COVID-19 through Ripe Revival Market, but the Farmers to Families Food Box Program, which was a government-funded contract to help farmers find outlets for their excess crops while supplying food to families that were struggling during the pandemic to find access to food. We took on a contract and packed about 60,000 boxes of produce in a 10-week period and distributed that through probably about 300 volunteers and 50 local nonprofits. And it really just opened our eyes to the need and to how communities in our area, families in the community, were just directly impacted so negatively by COVID-19 and the impacts going on. And during that time, we also worked with the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina to source 2 million pounds of produce and deliver it to agencies in our area. So we've done a lot of food relief programs, which really opened our eyes to the nonprofit world and to how we could be a facilitator in this space because of our economies of scale, because of our access to food and our experience. And so that really became a hard...
And distribution. I mean, that's not a small component of what you're doing.
Logistics is the hardest part, I think, in getting food from the farm to the consumer. And so we kind of check all the boxes in that regard at a lot of different scales. And so what it's done is it's positioned us to be a good facilitator within the community. And so without getting too long-winded on that, how do we get to a grocery store on wheels? Well, we've got these farming and food supply and distribution and processing companies. Well, now we've always allocated a part of our revenue back to our mission. And that used to be we'd buy produce and give it to families or give it to the food bank. But after working with so many nonprofits and doing that directly with families for so long, we said, hey, I think we can have a greater impact by stewarding these funds. So we allocate a percentage of all revenue from our for-profit to our mission, and we do so formally through our nonprofit right before Revival. Okay. And so that's our boots on the ground. That's how we live our mission out in the community.
Well, and I know I've seen Liz Lord out at a number of things, Housing Authority, and giving out boxes of food, and I think a lot of that has probably originated with you guys. So where are you getting the food? I mean, you said you're growing approximately 1,000, cultivating 1,000 acres. Are you buying it from other farmers? I believe you have a relationship with Kanita Family Farms, Family Life. I can't remember. I never get that. Richard Joyner's pet project.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
So how do you cobble together all this stuff, and how are you making those connectivity points with not for profits? I mean, that's no small task.
Well, I think fortunately, because of COVID, it forced us to be nimble and to really network. Because of all these food distribution contracts that we had, like I said, 50 nonprofits come into our building every week. And so we just started networking and just saw what Unity Through Community really does.
How did they find you, though? I mean, I've been to your place. It's not crazy far to find, but it's not a quarter Maine in Maine either.
Well, when we saw the contracts were there and we wanted to jump to action, I reached out to a friend of mine who was at Downey's Partnership for Children at the time, and she really started to help me network within the nonprofit space. And so eventually when people hear there's a lot of produce going around, they start coming and knocking on the door. And so after a couple of weeks of this, we had 300 plus people coming through that building every week and serving 5,000 families. And so as a result, farmers start to hear, hey, this guy's moving 3 tractor trailer loads of produce a week. I want in on that. And so eventually we've got a network of supply chain partners. We've got a network of distribution partners, nonprofit partners. And now, because of our mission to give back, we've got a network of diversified customers, both business to business and direct to consumer, who want to support our mission because they know that when they buy into anything that we're selling, they're giving back to the community at the same time.
So we hear a lot about food deserts, and obviously a lot of the work you're doing is having some impact on that. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, I'm sure that's a big part of your mission, and how are you creating food oases, I suppose? I guess part of the rolling grocery store is part of that, but is there a bigger vision involved?
Absolutely. So I would say that across our business ecosystem, so on the for-profit side and the nonprofit side, to make this not super confusing, our mission overall is to revive communities through food.
Right.
And so we take a multifaceted approach to how we do that. I'm going to talk a lot about our nonprofit because that's kind of where the heart is on how we, address the food insecurity crisis. Mm-hmm. We like to say the nonprofit exists to bridge the gap between farm excess and food access. And through our nonprofit, we have 3 programs that help create these food oases that you're referencing here. So the first program is called Farming Growth. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we've gone out and we've acquired tractors and farm equipment, farming implements, trucks, and things that allow us to put in community farms. We've got one at Nash Community College. We've got one at Southern Nash High School. Okay. We've got a community farm in Whitaker's on land that was contributed to the cause. And we're working with seed companies, and we're working with, companies within the industry who want research and development done, and we're growing crops. Mm-hmm. We're growing 23 commodities this summer through the nonprofit for the sole purpose of education, life skills development, and food supply to the mobile market and to local nonprofits.
Okay.
So that's our first program.
So your nonprofit is actually creating jobs as well. I mean, it's not just give a percentage of your earnings in your for-profit and make a distribution somehow or another. You're actually creating jobs, creating opportunities for folks, and I guess folks are learning in that process how to generate their own crops.
Absolutely, and that's the heart and the goal behind it is let's create jobs, let's create life skills. Let's, for example, Nash Community College, we've grown, I think we grew 8 commodities on a small plot on their farm site there on campus, and they're using it in the culinary program where Chef Frank is using it at camps with kids this summer to show them how to cut zucchini and do different cuts. Our registered dietitian is going into the child care programs there and doing raised garden beds and showing these kids how to work with their hands, how to grow things. So everything we do is meant on building intentional relationships that lead to some kind of growth.
Right.
We call that the Farming Growth Program for a reason. We're not just growing produce, we're growing skills, we're growing interest in the industry, and we're growing produce that can nourish communities. And that flows into the second program, which is the Mobile Market Program. And I think it's important, to note that this program for us, not only have we taken an old bus, we've got 3 buses. We're funding the second 2 right now to get those up and going. But it's a pay what you can mobile market. So it's important for us that people have access to local, fresh, and affordable foods. Mm-hmm. And they can do so regardless of their budget. But we also want there to be an element of dignity where families can walk onto this bus and pay for that food. Mm-hmm. And we would encourage them to do that if they have the budget for that, because the pay what you can model has proven to be very sustainable and successful in allowing communities to serve and love one another, whereas those with a budget to come on and buy can actually support those who may not, and do so with dignity and allow people to come together and have relationships together where there's no shame in that lifestyle right now.
Right. Well, talk about that a little bit. First time I ever saw a pay what you can kind of concept was in Boone, North Carolina, probably, maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. and it was a restaurant. So you go in, you order your meal, and you pay what you can and where we feel like it's worth. Do you cover your cost on that? Do you get close to it? I've always wondered the business side of that. Do I break even? Do I make a little something? I mean, I know that even making money in that is just really rolling over into the project and making it sustainable. But how does that kind of work out for you? I mean, just from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, sustainability is the key word there. So, I mean, we're still pretty early on in developing this model. We're collecting data to make sure we make it sustainable.
Sure.
The model came to my mind because of a restaurant, a place at the table in Raleigh.
Yep.
We had worked
very
with
similar
them.
concept to Willis and Boone.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're great. It's a great restaurant, great establishment. They've proven that it works in the restaurant space. And I just had this idea to do it with a bus. And for us, I think what we're learning is that to make it sustainable, the community has to support it. It can't just be a vehicle that is distributing food. It has to be a community asset where we at Ripe for Revival are able to support local farmers, and the community supports those farmers, but they're also supporting the community. And what we've learned is that through one-off events where the community comes on and some people pay and some people may not have a budget to pay, that's okay. We've come out pretty even so far on that.
That's kind of why I was curious, but you don't feel like you're long enough. You don't have enough data points to know, right?
Well, the biggest data point that we have is that calling on community organizations to support, sponsor host fees that make it sustainable. So whether the event is in the red or not, there's still support from the community that lifts up the resource, the bus, and the food access. So we're working with local churches. We're working with local nonprofits where they agree to help subsidize some of the food supply to offset the expenses, to take some of the risk out of it, and allow us to operate it just like it's a business where really we're able to leverage our farm, our economies of scale through our for-profit side to get cheaper access to supply chain and really pass through these economies of scale so that it's sustainable.
You can get it to yourself for wholesale, right? And that's a huge, or maybe even less than wholesale.
Absolutely.
So that's a huge benefit by itself. I mean, that's not lost on me. So as I go through it, is it the same stuff every week? Is it just whatever is seasonally available? I mean, how does the menu select it in terms of the offering, I guess, at the grocery store and even in the baskets that you're boxes.
Our delivery boxes,
Thank you.
No, that's a great question. Our goal is to always source as local as possible. We want to support local farmers and local food producers. Now, at times, especially as we come into the winter months, there's not as much available locally, but our goal is to support local first. And so we always work with as many local farmers as we can. We consolidate from local farmers into our facility, our produce company, where we have coolers and freezers to store this stuff. And we use it. We use it for our business. We sell to our customers, and whatever may be left over or whatever, if we're able to buy extra for mobile market events and plan ahead for that, then we buy in extra volume. And so what that does is gives us a lot of diversified product options. On the mobile market specifically, it's set up to hold 13 different RPCs. So that's a ready produce container or readily packable container, and it's an open plastic crate. So we can hold 13 different produce commodities. On the last event, I think of those 13, 9 of them were grown within an hour of Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Okay, great.
And all the frozen food, the milk, the eggs, the cheese, and the meat were all from North Carolina as well.
Sure. We started getting the Yadkin Valley and some of the places out west where the cheese is typically made. But
Ashe County is where our cheese comes from. Simply Natural Creamery in Aden is where we get the milk from.
Okay.
Braswell Family Farms we get our eggs from. There's a company, Wheat Swamp Angus, out of Snow Hill, North Carolina, we get beef from. Chicken is coming from a company in Winston-Salem. And so a lot of really great quality products that we're taking into communities, and we're super excited to share.
So you mentioned the fact you have an RD on staff, and I'm just really curious to hear about that, because I've spent a lot of time in healthcare. We use registered dietitians really to plan menu cycles for, different patients or populations based on nutritional needs and physical needs. What role is that RD actually playing in your organization, and how is that a benefit to you?
Oh gosh, it's a major benefit. I think Sarah Hester, she's our registered dietitian. Her title is Community Health Development Director.
Okay.
So that's a mouthful, but community health is something that we really want to focus on. And to us, at Rap Revival and at Rap for Revival, with our mission to revive communities through food, community health is not just physical in nature. It's not just eating healthier. It's really, how is the health of our communities, both emotionally, physically, spiritually, and just from a health and nutrition standpoint. When we're serving fresh produce, we want everyone to know how to use it. And in a lot of cases, when we're taking, for example, tomatillos that we got from a farm in Stantonsburg, when we put them on a bus and take them into a community where they may have never seen those, we want them to know how to cook them and to enjoy them. And so our registered dietitian, we have a cooking cart on our bus that rolls off into the parking lot. It's got a microwave, it's got a stove, it's got, hot plates, sink, everything. And she's actually preparing recipes with the products that are found on that market and handing out recipe cards that the community members can take home. And over time, we hope that as week after week, we do different recipes, we have different commodities, these families are gaining access to a Rolodex of recipes that have healthy implications on their lives. And we, over time, change their taste buds. We change their perspectives on eating healthy and give them a chest full of awesome recipes to cook with.
Sure. So is that happening? I mean, obviously happening when you're on site, but is it happening at your office? I mean, are you doing that with any kind of frequency? I mean, how's that information being dispersed other than just those local events or physical events in local places?
Yeah, great question. So one program that I haven't talked about through the nonprofit is our Revival Provisions program. And so what that is Sarah basically goes into organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, like the YMCA, works with Peacemakers, other nonprofits in the area. She's got a van that's an education van that's smaller than the bus that she can drive around, and that we're working to upfit to do these cooking demonstrations out at their sites where they're needed. She spends a lot of time on content and recipe development as far as trying to figure out how do we prepare in advance for these events. We're still really much in the planning phases. We're still a very small team. And so we wear a lot of hats. We're hoping that as we bring in more team members to take some of those responsibilities on the operations and logistics side, she can spend a lot more time in developing nutrition programs, and we're going to work on school nutrition and some other things like that.
Right. Well, good. Well, look, so you came back to Rocky Mount. Where were you before? And we talked a little bit about the genesis of the idea, but you didn't really go into the detail, I think, that most people would satisfy most people's curiosity.
Yeah.
So where were you before?
So born and raised here.
Sure.
I went
and
to...
Your dad is your biggest fan ever. I know he is.
Well, we, have a long family history in Rocky Mount. I love the city. And I have a big heart for it. I got a lot of fond memories here. And I left after graduating from high school. I went to college at NC State.
Sure.
Got a degree in business and always wanted to work in agriculture. I don't know why. I didn't grow up around a farm. But in high school, all my friends had family farms, and I was just drawn to the lifestyle. And I graduated from college 4 years, stayed in Raleigh for 2 years. I traded energy, and I loved it, but it just wasn't. I didn't feel fulfilled.
Sure.
So hedging energy was not my thing. I finally found a job in agriculture, took a sales job with Ham Farms out of Snow Hill, North Carolina.
Sure.
One of the largest sweet potato operations in the country. And, really just got a front row seat as Bobby Ham was scaling that business and integrating food processing businesses to utilize 100% of his sweet potatoes. And so that's really where this brainchild began of Rap Revival. As I saw this brilliant agribusinessman. I had moved to Farmville, North Carolina. I was living in a shack in the middle of a field and working for a sweet potato farm, and I've really just got a front row seat to how this farmer built this ecosystem of businesses that used 100% of his sweet potatoes, food processing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And saw the impact it had on his bottom line, but wanted to do something a little more mission driven and in that same mindset. And that's how we really started to think about Rap Revival.
And so where the notion of coming up with protein gummies from the byproduct. I mean, so now you've got the skin of the sweet potato that I'm sure is not being used a lot, but so how How did that come to be?
So there was some technology from NC State that was the patented the secret sauce, we would say, for that. They had seen what at the time I had been a part of founding a company that was another CPG or consumer packaged goods food company, and it was relatively successful. We were taking sweet potato powder, and we made a flour that was in about 3,000 grocery stores across the country, and they just saw how we took that brand to life and to the market, and they came to us with the technology and said, hey, do you want to license this into a product? And we said, sure, let's do it. And that's how the gummy started.
Well, look, we're out of time. I'm sure there's something I haven't asked you, but if there is, please let me know what that might be. But I really appreciate you coming. I really appreciate you telling your story. I hope you have much success, and let me know what I can do, if anything, to help you further the mission, because I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I think it is something that is certainly beneficial to our community.
Well, we appreciate your continued support, the city's support, and everyone that's been, advocates for us. And if anybody's interested in learning more, riperevival.com is where you can learn about both our for-profit and our nonprofit as well. So
awesome.